Clendon.
And it is a pleasure to have almost the last word on a bill that has had a very protracted journey through this House. Its time in the House, of course, extended by the rearguard action against a particularly appalling piece of legislation, the BSN bill, and the Greens look forward to being part of a future government that will turn that bill around and give us some legislation that puts a proper support around students and indeed our tertiary institutions. This bill is something dear to my heart. We've been very pleased to support it. My own academic career, if you like, has bridged the gap between arts or humanities and science. I was fortunate to do a BA at Auckland University in the late 80s, having come to tertiary study as an adult. There were people there at that time, remarkable people, some of the lecturers, teachers, people like Barry Gustafson, Andrew Sharp, Linda and Graham Smith, Colin Lancashire. Good thinkers, people who understood both the history and the present moment and who anticipated some of the shifts in education and indeed in science that were inevitable as a result of the so-called neoliberal revolution of the 80s and 90s. From that, I then went to Lincoln University to do a Master of Science degree. And it was a real revelation to me, I have to say, having come from one world view informing learning and knowledge in an arts context, to go to do a science degree and discover people coming from a fundamentally different world view, a different set of expectations and experiences about teaching and learning. It was a revelation, and I think, as Moana Maki has commented in her contribution, that we are now coming back to a place that I think even in the Western tradition, historically there were remarkable men and women who understood natural science, who understood geology and astronomy and biology, but also knew their classics, knew their history, knew their culture. And this is a step back towards formalising a better integration of those two very different perspectives. C.P. Snow in the 1930s, 1931 I think, his seminal essay, The Two Cultures, captured very well the extent to which science and humanities had got locked into their separate silos for a variety of reasons and were creating different languages, and more importantly they were making us almost unable to share knowledge, to share experiences across science, so-called natural science and the humanities. And this bill is a step towards, as I say, formalising what actually is almost these days common practice in bringing together multidisciplinary approaches, multifunctional approaches even, to solving problems, to dealing with the challenges, scientific, cultural, social, economic, of the 21st century. So I was fortunate, in fact, this morning to be on campus at Lincoln, their orientation program, being there as part of the Greens on Campus. It was rewarding to see the waves of students desperate to find out more about the Green Party and to get involved with us, of course. But more so, it was interesting to talk particularly to some of the postgrads who are now doing things like postgrad degrees in international conservation management, postgrad degrees in ecosystem management. And these are relatively new disciplines. Historically, you would study ecology, or you might study biology, whole organism biology, molecular biology, or you might study planning. And these disciplines are now being brought together in programs that are going to enrich us as New Zealanders, the individuals pursuing those programs. My own experience of teaching ecosystem management, for example, requires you to have a good understanding of the core principles of ecology, which in my view should inform economics, but also to understand the day-to-day human impact, the human relationship with the natural world, with ecosystems upon which we depend and which we are capable and have proven ourselves capable of extensively modifying, not always in ways that are positive for us or those ecosystems. So, sir, it is a pleasure to, as I say, to be part of the wrapping up phase of this bill, if we like. I believe the Royal Society will continue to go from strength to strength. I think it's important to acknowledge, as my colleague Catherine Delahunty mentioned, that I think in this coming together in arts and humanity, we should acknowledge and even pursue the contribution that forms of Indigenous knowledge have to make, not least of all Mātauranga Māori. those remarkable people, those Polynesians who came to New Zealand and became tangata whenua, became Māori, survived and thrived in this place because they were very good observing natural cycles. They developed over not very many generations, an extraordinarily subtle and complete understanding of the biology, of the geology, of the meteorology of this country in a way that enabled them to survive and to thrive. And they also embedded that within a cultural framework that acknowledged the metaphysical and the spiritual. And I think what I consider the false distinction between so-called objective scientific knowledge and the metaphysical, the spiritual, is something that has not served us well. And I do think, in all humility, that bodies like the Royal Society, scientists generally, are now starting to re-engage with the spiritual, with the non-objective world, if you like. And I think that will serve us well into the future. So, sir, I'll just wrap up my brief comments to say again, the Greens wholeheartedly support this. It has been an interesting journey in more ways than one, and we do wish the Royal Society well in its future, and indeed the scientific endeavour upon which our future economic well-being certainly will in part depend. Kia ora.
I call Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've always wanted to attend